I think living well means I'm taking advantage of this quickly shortening opportunity of life. Now that I'm an old fogey, that this is the time now more than ever, since ambitions and career have kind of taken a slower, they're a quieter voice, or they're more in the past. That it's now about how am I practicing kindness and compassion and gratitude in my life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Martin Kachuck. Martin is affectionately referred to as Sampad. Sampad is a recently retired middle school teacher, stage director, actor in and around the South Bay area, writer, and residential community member of Mt Madonna Center. Sampad and his wife, Kalpana, moved to Mt Madonna Center in 1980 and have been there since. One of the center's group founders, Sampad had the good fortune to spend the majority of his adult life studying with and enjoying the company of Baba Hare Dass, or affectionately called Babaji. Babaji passed away in 2018. So much of what he has learned about life and its compelling journey he attributes to that time spent with Babaji. For over 4 decades, Sampad dedicated his life to the craft of teaching, working for over 40 years at Mt Madonna School, a private school on the center's property, where he taught middle school English and was the director of the school's ambitious theater arts department. The school produces 3 major productions a year, including the annual presentation of the Ramayana that involves the whole school, preschool through 12th grade. Although retired, Sampad still participates in Mt Madonna Center events, presenting workshops for community members, using approachable theater games and activities as a method to foster creativity, openness, trust, and fun. Sampad, my brother, how are you?
Okay, my man, how are you doing?
I am great. I am excited to have this conversation with you today. And audience, I'm going to tell you from the beginning, I don't know how this conversation is going to unfold, but Sampad is a funny guy. He's hilarious, a beautiful soul, and I feel like it's a privilege to have you here to share your wisdom and your playfulness and how you express yourself. It's just beautiful, man, and looking forward to this conversation. So I know I just read that introduction. I do like for guests to introduce themselves beyond the bio and you say, how do you feel in this moment about yourself and who you are and how would you like to share yourself with the audience?
I know when I was in a writing group, uh, they asked you what your title is, and I said aspirant. And I guess that sort of holds, where, there's a code that I hold inside me in my heart that I want to be like. And I think in that aspiration is sort of where I live. This want to make sure that in my life, I hold true to my integrity, um, no matter what I do, and to find that balance between a mind that the Buddhists will call the monkey mind. As Babaji once said to me, he wrote, "The way your mind works," and I don't think it was a compliment. I think it's just with a busy mind like mine, how important it is to um, have my heart in the right place and keep the priorities clear. So, who I am, I mean that I'm an aspirant. I'm on this journey, trying to be the best person I can be before my time's up.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And we need that in the world. I applaud that because, yeah, our aspiration for being the best version of ourselves is, you know, quote unquote, I feel like personally it's our purpose in life. I know purpose is individual, of course, but I think ultimately realizing what our individual purposes are is an important part of the equation of being a human being. So when I say, "Oh, it's our purpose," I'm just trying to say that it's important
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
to have that aspiration for realization of who we really are. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, way back in the day when this sort of journey became more materialized, and now when I tell the story of Babaji, it all sounds slightly exotic, like, oh, I had a guru. Back in the 70s, it was kind of that's what you did when you went on the journey of self-actualization, or moving to Santa Cruz, which was like the hub, it seemed like, of California, of all this kind of spiritual movement. Um, and now there's something, when I'm explaining Mt Madonna Center and explaining Babaji, it does feel like, well, that's a very fascinating story. Tell me more, and how, now of course life is different. I'm way older than back then. Babaji's not here, and the center itself has gone through its transformations, and I've had to really look at what is it that I truly am trying to do and be with my life. When things started, it was so much like, oh, I'm going to get enlightened. I will merge into the great cosmos. And this was my whole practice. And then, some 40 some odd years later, I think if that all happens, great. If the
Right.
universe me up into some higher consciousness moment, it's wonderful. But it's what I'm doing as I walk the planet here that seems to be the most important.
Oh, wow, beautiful. Yeah, I feel you on that. I'm a little younger in this game, but I know when I
Yeah, you're
first
just a youngin'.
I know when I first started doing all this stuff. I mean, I guess it started I guess it started in my early 20s actually, when just exploring these ideas. It wasn't quite yoga yet, but when I began to really study and practice yoga, I realized, oh, I've been on this yogic journey for a long time, and
Right,
this
right.
aspiration. I thought I was gonna like get it super enlightening if I just do all these things and push myself to challenge myself to do this. I'm like, actually, it's not what I thought it was, or I'm not
Mm,
even saying I'm enlightened either. It's just the path is not what I thought it was, and it's I would say more beautiful than I thought it, but it's beautiful. It's challenging. It's a very interesting journey, this life, and those who aspire to really work on developing and cultivating our capacity to be loving beings, it's very interesting um, what it turns out to be. It's just the daily moments, and how we navigate the daily moments
that's,
where
that's right.
is where it's at. It's where it's happening. Not like, not just dissolving into bliss and
That's
oh, that's
right.
great. That's great. It happens great, but
And that leaning on the theoretical, it's like, okay, here's what my tenets of life are, because I've studied the Yoga Sutras, or I've studied whatever my path is towards my best self. And then I'm going to espouse all those things. I'm going to say, yes, I need to, but it's a whole different thing, as you say, to be in interaction and to watch the ebbs and flows in this life that's filled with peaks, and yet we know the valleys. How to navigate the goods and the bads. So there's this sense of proper humility as
mm-hmm.
opposed to fake humility, where I'm kind of playing a part. I'm playing the part of the spiritual person. And then, when the camera's off, I'm stumbling and bumbling along. That this path, it just continues, from minute to minute, day to day. And it is very real. And I think I don't know if it's softened, but it's definitely closer to myself now than it was when I was wearing the costumery, both internally and externally,
Mm.
of what I thought a spiritual being was. I think now it's a little bit more real and and humbling.
Right, right. It's boy.
Because the bar's up here, and a lot of the times, it's this is where I am, and I'll go
Hmm.
and accepting. I had a quick story about. I asked Babaji once. I said, Babaji, what's the most important thing that I should work on? And again, Babaji was a silent monk. And back in the day, he wrote on a chalkboard. It kind of evolved. He went into etch a sketch for a while. It was kind of funny. But so you would hear the chalk and feel, that sound. The sound kind of contributed to the great suspense of what he was gonna, impart. So when I asked Babaji this question, I thought it was going to be some lofty thing of, enlightened, blah blah blah. And he wrote without hesitation, acceptance.
Mm.
And I saw that, and really, I had no friggin' idea. And now, some 40 billion years later, I think it's starting to grok to me that acceptance was about the externals and it was about the internals. While we're still trying to be the great people that we want to be, that there is some level of acceptance that has to work alongside and how to counterbalance the drive with the sense of what is.
Hmm. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Well, speaking of which, I think all of this feeds into this the question of this podcast is, so what does living well mean to you? What is a life well lived? What does that look like? A
Hmm.
good life.
Okay. Well, I'll give it a shot. Um, I got my little notes just in case I go spacey. But I would think for me, it's that regular spiritual meditate. I don't know, spiritual, such a coin word now, but the meditation practice to begin each day. That essential moment to remember my purpose, and then somehow imbue the fibers of my being with enough of that electricity to take me through the travels of the day and night. Um, but that the day starts that way, and again, I have to credit Babaji where he was so adamant about a regular practice each day. And I would say, "Would I do it so horribly?" And he goes, "Well, at least you got to do it." It reminds me of one of my writing mentors, Natalie Goldberg, says you have to be willing to write the worst crap in the world, um, but you do the practice because it's essential that we get the stability of it. That living well is to have that part of my life. Um, I think there's living well for me is a life that's balanced, that has meaningful outputs. I'm in service, I'm in creative projects, and enough spaciousness to hug my little cats, slow things down, and be. And I have to say, it's a whole lot easier now that I'm retired, and I have great compassion for those of us that are working your butts off to try to make it through the life demands that are thrown on us. And in retirement, I have more of allowance to have a less intensified life. Um, and still, there's that struggle of how to make it balanced. Um, Living well means I'm exercising daily. We've got a beautiful forested property up where I live, about 300 some odd acres of forested land. And I can walk there. I try to walk every day for about an hour or so. There's a park down, Mt Madonna Park's just down the road. So I have this idyllic situation for not only getting my exercises, but breathing the beauty of nature that's right there around the corner. And if I look out my window, you can see the Monterey Bay. I mean, it's just I am so blessed to be where I am at Mt Madonna Center. And the beaches are about an hour away, so I can drive down to Santos and walk along the coast and appreciate Mother Ocean as she dances her dance. I think living well means I'm taking advantage of this quickly shortening opportunity of life. Now that I'm an old fogey, that this is the time now more than ever, since ambitions and career have kind of taken a slower, they're a quieter voice, or they're more in the past. That it's now about how am I practicing kindness and compassion and gratitude in my life. And anyone who knows me knows that I have a strong perfectionist nature. So living well means that I'm not ruled by it, and that's my dance. How not not how to be okay when things are not perfect, and that I have my little scorecard that seems to judge all interaction. That I try to tone down the volume of that. That living well means I'm not ruled by that voice. That I see the voice is there to help me, but it's not going to dominate me. That's my prayer. And lastly, I think living well means that I accept others and myself for who we are in the present moment. We all have our life histories, our moments, our challenges, everything that brought us to this moment of interaction. So I think that's living well is living in some place of acceptance, not settling for horrible, but accepting that this is the moment, and then we'll build on that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
So that was my
Beautiful.
6 points.
I love it. I love it. Let's
And scene.
let's hope that I hope that we can explore a little bit of those more. That's just beautiful. I love how you start off with practice and um, the importance and the value of practice. And can you say a little bit more about that? I know that was very succinct and articulate there, but I would love to if it's just because it's such a big piece of the equation. All those other things are great, but I love how you start off with practice because I think there's a lot of subtle wisdom in that. Beginning with practice. Can you say a little more about that? What practice is, and then and
Yeah,
how it
and with
helps.
great respect that everybody's practice is so beautifully different,
Mm-hmm.
and what works for someone else may not work for me or for the person next to me. So I think practice is some sort of reminder of the greater reality, and whatever terminology works for us. And as I coming from a Jewish background, um, there's there's a bit of cynicism about an interactive God, and I don't know if I'm tagging that on the Jewish side, or maybe it's just my own cynical side. But I think there's that feeling of when I'm sitting down to begin, there's all kinds of stuff before I do my practice. But okay, when I'm sitting down to do that practice before the day officially starts, it's just a reminder, whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or longer, that in the quiet, in that, what I think of as like a divine reservoir that's somewhere in there that doesn't have a lot of explanations, in fact, doesn't have any explanations, that the way I'm going to access it is to somehow get quiet enough, even if it's just a moment that fills me with some sense of the greater permanence that in the middle of all this impermanence. Yeah, again, that image of a reservoir that's in there. If I just am quiet enough, I can go swimming in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I mean, in a sense, that's the practice, and for me personally, it's got a lot of the sort of Hindu aspects, which is fascinating for me. But I think that's what I was taught. That's what I try to use. And at the same time, I see all this as vehicles to try to get to the quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if
Yeah.
that helped, but I think that's kind of what's on my mind when you ask that.
Yeah. Oh, it's all helpful. I mean, we're just having a playful conversation. So that's what comes up in the moment. That's great. And I love that, that taking the time to. So when I think about practice, I think about it as repeating something and building a habit of mind um, for whatever it is. So you can practice, I don't know, kicking a soccer ball or whatever, you'll get better at
That's right.
the habit
That's
of
right.
being kicking that soccer ball in a particular way and building that relationship with the soccer ball. But in this case, you're building that relationship with this reservoir, to use your language. And when we quiet down and listen deeply, we can tap more into that reservoir. And that requires practice. That requires doing that over and over and over and over again, increasing the likelihood of tapping into that reservoir.
That's right.
And that's the beauty of practice. So to start off talking about living well, what are the exercises that I am doing? What am I doing? What activities am I engaged in that are habit forming? And I asked the question for myself: how are these habits conducive to a life well lived, a good life?
Yeah.
And then I think about all the various attributes of what that is. But it
Yeah.
begins with practice. And I like to remind myself and others, if I'm in some kind of teaching capacity, um, that we're practicing all the time,
That's
and
right.
being aware of the activities that we're engaged in and the habits that we are creating for ourselves, and to be aware of that. And the beauty of the yogic tradition, like Babaji says, or most yogis would tell you, that it's a toolkit of
Yeah.
various things to do to help facilitate an experience, a way of being in the world, becoming in the world. Various traditions have different ideas about that. But the
Yeah.
idea is to apply some type of tool, some type of set of activities to help facilitate this thing that you desire. And in desiring, as you initially say, you're an aspirant, you're desiring to be the best version of yourself, desiring to experience that reservoir of peace and stillness, and connecting with the quote unquote permanence within this realm of impermanence. I think that's, I think that's beautiful. I think that that requires some type of attention towards that, and practice
Mm.
allows us to do that, and to be
Yeah.
aware of the type of practices that we're doing. When you wake up and you get to your practice, I know for me, it reminds me, like you said, it reminds me that, okay, then what am I trying to cultivate here in my
That's right.
life? And I
Yeah.
start my day off thinking, okay, I see what it is I'm trying to do. And how do I be
Yeah.
mindful of the activities that I engage in throughout the rest of my day to the best of my
That's right.
abilities, that facilitates this outcome, quote unquote outcome, that I am
Yeah.
desiring. Yeah.
And I just love that that the term practice implies that it's not going to be, and again, I'm going to go back to my perfectionist challenge, but that there is an imperfection in it because we are practicing. I'm in a Shakespeare class now. I'm going downtown, and I'm sitting in a room with other folks, and I've been doing the theater shindig for a good part of my most of my adult life. But there I am, and I'm wanting so much to be perfect in this little acting class and do the Shakespeare to the best of my ability. And as the beautiful guy that's leading this, Bill Peters, says, this is about the practice of it, and it's not about the perfection of it. It's like we
Mm-hmm.
are on this journey of learning, and that to me was so metaphorical, in a way of all of this. Where I thought when I first started on this journey, um, that it was going to be the knowledge was going to be given to me by the length of time I spent sitting in meditation. That would be the goal of it. Was I going to extend that meditation time because I had nothing to do with the world? Who knows what all the high ambition I had in my white clothes back in the day. But I think now, it is practice, and as you say, yeah, there's that time in the morning to reaffirm what we're about. But really, the practice is all day long, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the real crucial practice. And to set some gears into motion in that morning meditation that says, "Here comes another day of life. May I practice the values that are so essential to me now, and let them be true, and let me choose them rather than following some edict that has no meaning for me. I get to choose what those values are, and hopefully they're the right ones, and follow that path with a good heart."
Mm-hmm. Oh, so beautiful. I love it. Yeah, that's it. I'm glad you brought in, because I was going to actually mention that too, about that imperfection part, because I have that too. It's yeah, it has helped me in many aspects of my life for sure. That perfectionism, but it's all I can see the danger and the harm too. It can make me stagnant. It can make me, yeah, it can be it can take emotional toll on me. Particularly when you have this desire to quote unquote perfect yourself. I want to
Yeah,
make myself, I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to say anything wrong. And five
that's
minutes
right.
later, quote unquote, you say something wrong. You're like, wow,
That's
this is crazy. Dude, I'm crazy. I don't want to be like
yeah,
this. And it's like, that's life, man. It's messy. It's a
that's right.
practice. You're just doing the best you can, man. You're going to slip. It's
Yeah,
just,
and there's no question. I hate that when it happens, and then I'm realizing I'm living my life an apology. You know, most of the time it's like I'm so sorry that I did not hit that bar the way I wanted to. I
yeah.
didn't interact with that person the way I wanted to, and I just wish, and filled with those those tools of the mind that don't always help. The
Mm-hmm.
tapes about regret, the tapes about should have, would have, could have, that are that filter into my mind, and how to sort of honor what's the underlying message is. That was a stumble, and now we're going to move forward. How to move forward, by learning by what happened, not about the beat down. That there was this imperfection that sort of ruined anything, because it's just as you said, we're going to blow it, and then we have to move forward,
Mm-hmm.
and try again, because we're going to get an opportunity. I love, my wife used to say to me, when I was teaching, I'd come home and go, damn, I was teaching middle school kids. Actually,
Uh-huh.
they were teaching me. I was in the room, and they continually taught me. But that sense when I would come home and go, man, I was not at my best today. And she would say, well, guess what? You have another opportunity tomorrow to practice again. And that's that. I mean, for teachers, sure, but for anyone, when we're in our job or in our interactive mode, unless we're going to hole up, most of us are going to be thrust out there again. And we try again to be the best person we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it, folks. And I think I'm glad that we're having this conversation. It comes up often on this podcast. I speak to it, and I think having conversations with people and really recognizing that this is the life. Life is messy. It's the blues, and it's, we're not going to get it perfect all the time. That doesn't mean we don't try. That doesn't mean that we don't put forth the effort. That doesn't mean we don't work on cultivating, developing ourselves. That's why some people, I feel like they say that, again, these are all metaphors, folks, that people say that life is our education. This is a way for us to learn. I'm like, yeah, that's a great analogy or a metaphor, because of what you just said. We're constantly stumbling. We're figuring it out moment to moment. We don't know what moment is going to be next and how we're going to respond to it. Now we cultivate all these different tools. We have all these different things in our toolkit, our library, to deal with the next moment, but we don't really
Yeah.
know until we get in it. And then once we're in it, oh, I could have done something a little bit different. That's actually a good thing. I guess the
Yeah.
thing is we want to minimize or mitigate harm as much as we possibly can throughout the journey, because we're
Right.
going to stumble. But the key is, how do I, now when I talk about this stuff, I'm like, the goal is to minimize unnecessary suffering, because is the suffering going to be there, but it's like, how do you minimize the unnecessary shit that we could avoid?
Yeah, I love
And
that.
that requires the practice. That's looking at life the way you're presented in here is, yeah, we're gonna stumble. It's great to have that in the backdrop, like, okay, do your best. The quote unquote perfection is there, but don't be a slave to that, because
Yeah,
you will come into contact that's going to bump heads with your perfectionism.
that's right.
It will happen.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, inevitable. It's inevitable.
exactly.
I'm also reflecting. I don't know why it just sort of popped in my mind, but back in the day, there was a self-esteem movement, and
Mm,
in that, not that it still is, that it isn't still happening. Of course it is, but it was trying to be this articulated movement when I was, particularly during when I was teaching. I think it was probably in the 80s, early 90s, and there was this whole thing about you don't criticize, as a teacher to a student do. It's about, making sure that the kid feels empowered and confident, and nary a critical word should be thrown. And it's a beautiful thing, but I found it to be difficult and to
Mm-hmm.
fully believe in, that it's all right for us to prop ourselves up, and I think we need to. And it's also, I think, okay, to understand where we've stumbled and how to, and sometimes we need help and how to move forward. And I think now, who knows what COVID has done for all of us, particularly, but for the young folks who who lost a couple of years in their process
Mm-hmm.
of interaction and learning. And there's this feeling of, what I would hear from parents, like, I want to protect my kid from stress now because they can't handle stress. So there'd be sort of this helicopter parent syndrome of trying to stand in front of the kid and not have them receive any kind of critical suggestion or feedback. And there's, that thought of, hey, look, I'm me. I love me. I love everything about me. And how to balance that with, oh, I want to have I have this love for myself. Well, good for me. And I also have an openness to learn and to continue to get better. And, that's a dance that it's forever until I'm gone, where I accept me. And yes, if I want to say I love me, and I want to be open to things that I can do better, and
Yeah.
how to balance that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so glad you brought that up. Beautiful, because um, I've worked with schools. I'm working in a temporarily right now in middle school. I mean, I teach capoeira to kids, and
Oh,
so I'm
sweet.
constantly working in these situations with young folks in schools, and more so in the past. But one of the big issues that I found in various schools, I've been in private, public, all of it, charter, and yeah, there's this idea, of this idea we can't harm kids. We can't put them in challenging situations. You can't say
Right.
this thing. You can't say that thing. I'm like, that's not real. And I
That's
think
right.
that
That's right.
the confidence is you want them to be confident enough to deal with the challenges. That doesn't mean you take all challenges away.
That's right.
Like what we are saying about practice. Yeah, to sit down and say, I don't know, whatever the practice is, meditation or whatever, even to just singing, it doesn't always feel good. There's a challenge associated with it. There's
That's
generally a
right.
challenge associated with a practice that you're engaged in. You're
Yeah.
challenging yourself, you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation and seeing how you can deal with that discomfort. And in the process of being in that uncomfortable situation, you're cultivating a skill set to deal with it. And so when we take that away from a child or we take that away from people, they become spoiled brats. They become little brats that feel like the world needs to conform to every little thing, every
That's right.
whim that comes to their mind because they've been taught that they are perfectly fine the way they are, and their ideas, they've done their homework and their ideas are
That's right.
perfect, and so
That's right.
therefore the world needs to conform to these ideas. That's a disservice to them and the world for sure, but that's a major
Yeah.
disservice to a person when we do that to them. And I'm like, for me, I think, yeah, you can be loving, kind, and tender and teach all of those various values, of course, and have teaching a child that, hey, a person to be confident, but that doesn't mean you take the challenge away. And that means
That's
sometimes
right.
you might have to yell because you're human, and like humans yell sometimes, and you yell and
Yeah.
you're like, shut up. And you might not, and you might say to yourself, like, I probably shouldn't have said shut up. But it's not a case where the child is some fragile thing, they're going to fall apart. They probably
That's right.
need to be quiet. And you made the statement, shut up, to emphasize, hey, be quiet. They're not going to be destroyed. Then you apologize later, like, hey, I probably could have
That's right.
said that differently.
That's
We
right.
lose all of those teaching moments by creating this fake world
That's right.
that's way far removed from reality. And you see it now with these young folks committing have all kinds of mental distress, be it
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff. That's
Yeah.
disproportionate to what it used to be, and a lot of it is because of what I feel. And there are people who are writing about this and talking about this too, where Like, hold on for a minute, what are we doing? We're treating people like they're fragile, and when we do that, we do them a disservice. And so when life
Yeah.
hits them, they can't handle it, and they end up commit suicide or end up doing something crazy just because
Yeah.
it's different. Altering themselves in some capacity such that they're trying to fit themselves like, okay, this one is not working, I need to completely do something totally different, just
Right.
because the world, I've been taught that the world conforms to my idea. It's not conforming in this
No.
construct of myself. Let me create a different construct of myself, and then maybe when I create that construct of myself, I won't have challenges, and I can, like my teachers told me, I can just be free to be
That's it.
this confident in this other person. And then when they do all of that and they realize like, oh, it's still
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. We're not ready. Yeah. And I think that was said beautifully, Broderick. Thank you. I think there's a way to honor the fragilities that we all have, and at the same time, in there's an ownership of when things go wrong, and I've done my share of shut-ups. In the billions of years I spent in the classroom, where something happened, those moments of, yes, to honor the fragilities, and to be mindful of how, if I'm in a position of giving feedback, how I do that in a way that is honoring of the person. And when I was working with 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they're in this beautifully complex time of life. They're trying to figure out who the hell they are. They're trying on different personality costumes, literally, sometimes by the day or by the minute. Moods are oscillating, because everything's whirling. And here's this old man outside of them, with that when I taught with a certain intensity. And when things would happen that would kind of rattle me, I would, give the intensity, hopefully not blowing it by screaming it at the top of my lungs, but I would give them intensity. And I, and then it was up to me in reflection to come back to those kids and model what it's like to own up and be
Mm-hmm.
accountable. That's one of the big values in my life. It's responsibility, sure, to do the tasks that I'm asked to do in the best way that I can, and then accountability. I can blame on, and maybe there's rightfully so, that others have affected what I was trying to do. But what's my part in it? What's the ownership so that I can learn from it and move forward? And I would ask my students to do the same thing. Where can we be accountable? Where can we own? And I had plenty of opportunities to model that, because there was always something where I went, oh, that. I remember there was one. I worked as a theater director for kids, in my teaching responsibilities in running the performing arts program at the school, and that included casting kids. And I remember a parent wrote me a long letter. Um, I guess it was, yeah, we had email back then. So I think it was an email. And it basically said, by casting my kid in the part you did, you have ruined her self-esteem. And here, some 40 years, I'm still remembering that email. And I thought, how, how fragile do you think your child is that this random play, or she didn't get this one part they wanted and they got some other part, is now devastated this kid to the core, that they cannot recover. Even though I did need to appreciate, for that kid and for that family, this was a huge moment, and one that had to be navigated with love and with patience. But to say that it's ruined, no, it's not ruined. It's been challenged, and now how are we going to navigate the challenge?
Mm-hmm.
But you said it beautifully. So I just say, yeah, what you said.
No, I'm saying yeah when you said it too. So what? This is something, that analogy that I use a lot, and I think you brought it up several times now, and we'll get to those other points. But theater, I, I think. Well, before I say anything, I want to hear what you have to say about what role can you can talk about this metaphorically, however you like, theater play in a life, in the good life? What role can theater play?
I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, I mean, I'm a proponent, as you know me, and you
Yeah.
know that I believe in the craft and the activity of it. I see it as an intensive spiritual practice. When folk think of theater, often they just think of actors claiming or speaking very loudly on stage and broadcasting and having fragile egos and being hopefully told how wonderful they are, or going to therapy because they feel so terribly insecure, and that's a bunch of fakery and all that. Theater for me has been about so much of the qualities that I aspired. Preparation, positive mindset, openness to interaction, finding magical balance with the internal critical voice that says you can't, and this fantastic event of theater that says you got no choice. Once your butt's out there on stage, there's this beautiful surrender to the moment, the wild ride of live performance where it's required that I let go, that I have to trust. I have to trust myself. I have to trust my stage partners. I had a hiking guide once say, hey, Martin, trust the shoes. And I think she meant, as I was walking downhill, that I could trust the traction of my shoes wasn't going to slip. And I think the same thing with theater is that we work very hard to prepare for this moment. And this is the for those of us who are doing the onstage stuff. But it goes beyond that. But if you're in the onstage, you prepare as best you hammer the lines, you hammer it all, you get the blocking, how you move on stage, what you're supposed to do and say and feel and all that. And then you trust the shoes. You trust the process and the bond that and camaraderie that's formed with folk who go through an experience of, well, for better or worse, the term theater. And because you've attended the workshops that I'm facilitating, but the hope is in these times together. We're not worrying about performance. We're not preparing lines to be shown to audience. In the workshop, even more so, there's this feeling of I'm going to connect to my humanity. I'm going to connect to my feeling place, hopefully without a whole bunch of judgment about myself and about others that are sharing this activity in the room with me. That I'm going to play in a way that I used to when I was a kid, that's afraid to follow some tangent and see where it takes me, and to enjoy the simple activity of breathing in and out and facing someone, or maybe not. Maybe I'm doing some exercise on my own in that workshop, where I'm moving in a way that's releasing some, I don't know, some inner memory or beautiful emotional experience that we had, and that it comes back into us, and then you're in this room with others who are doing the same thing, and there's that bond and beautiful that happens when our hearts open and we find the humanity of each other. I think that's where theater is its best tool for me. So yeah, if you're a performer, there's a beautiful experience of, oh, I'm behind the curtain, and I hear the entry music. I know in 2 seconds I'm going out on stage. I can't just say, hey guys, I'm not into it today. This is it. I got to get my ass out there. But in a theater class where we are playing and experimenting, it's this sense of, hey, we're in this, here we are. We're not gonna belabor anything more than just this moment of whatever it is. And then that builds to some other moment, and that you're in good hands. And I'm gonna be there with you, and you're gonna be there with me, and here we go.
I love it. Oh, I love it. I there's so much to say about that. I typically use the analogy that life is like a theater. It's we're all actors in this game of life, and like those
Shakespeare
work.
knew.
Yeah, yeah. Like those.
So
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
No, I
like
was just going to say, one of Shakespeare's adages is, all we're all players on the stage of life. So you're
mm-hmm.
quoting Shakespeare, and good for you. But keep going, bud.
That's good. I need to. I never, when I was young, I didn't. When I went through Shakespeare, I didn't read that. When I was a kid, I didn't read any of that stuff. I'm like, now I want to do it though. At this phase of my life, that would be great to just go through all of that. But yeah, I think when you're talking about when you do like a workshop and you're practicing, it's like a ritual practice in some sense. You're practicing this thing, this activity, you're getting in touch with yourself. It's related to like when we sit down and do a meditation practice or whatever. And it's
Right.
just so, it's such a beautiful way of looking at the world. Again, folks, as one out of many, but it's such an interesting way of looking at the world and thinking about how our experiences are. Because at the end of the day, like you say, when we on the stage of life and our moments, we just got to show up. We show up and do the best that we can, and that speaks to a lot of what we were saying earlier. That's all we can do. We put the practice in, we've built the relationships with ourselves and with others in the practice. And then the moment has arrived. How am I going to show up? And actually, I look at it this way: even when we're practicing, we practice before then to meet that moment when we're in that
Yeah,
situation. So it's
that's
just,
right.
it's a beautiful analogy, metaphor for life, I
Yeah,
think, theater.
yeah,
And I think this is one thing I love. This is what I love about the Mount Madonna School, that you all do that. I think the gift that you're giving these kids,
yeah,
to have that kind of practice. And a lot, I won't get too much into how poor our educational system is, and
mm,
but I think there's a lot missing
yeah,
in our educational system because we don't do enough of the arts. We don't do this type of stuff, and where people get the opportunity to come in touch with their feelings, their emotions, and all the things that you just mentioned there. What a gift to
yeah,
give somebody, especially a kid, the opportunity to have that type of exploration. Exploration. You talk about social emotional learning. There it is.
yeah. I am so grateful to Mount Madonna School for the allowance, and as you say, their dedication to having arts part of the foundation of the program. And I can't tell you how many times I've had conversation with parents when I was teaching, where they would question, "Why are you making my kid do performing arts? For God's sakes, they have no interest in being a performer. They want to be something else that's more important. So why are you making them do this class?" And I felt so supported, particularly back in the day. Performing arts was required. It wasn't an elective. Everybody did it. And because I think the founders of the school saw that it's essential that they have out creative self-expression is part of our the fabric of what we're trying to weave up there at our, in our folk when they walk off the campus into life. So yeah, without an arts education, and we had a good visual arts program, absolutely strong music program, and this theater program that had these kids part of this operation, and part of this phenomena of community building, because in the end it was community building, where those
Mhm.
50 kids in middle school would be jammed into that rehearsal room, and there were, and we would navigate the 2.5 months of preparation. Yeah, we're preparing for a show, and yeah, there's a product that's going to be seen, but it was really about the building of community and how those kids became trusting of each other much more, how the social sort of cliques in performing arts, it had to expand. It couldn't be just your bestie. It was really, you're relying on everybody and they're relying on you. That sense. And athletes know this in the sports programs in the schools, the same thing. I don't think theater's any different. But like you said, so grateful for how that this school in particular, and there's other schools that do it, but boy, Mount Madonna School has just been solid in this belief, and still are. So hallelujah to that.
No, it's so good, so good. I'm just, yeah, happy that's happening. I think there's going to be in the years to come. There's a it's already happening. A reevaluation of how we educate people. You know, we think about a humanistic education. You know,
Yeah,
developing humans to be fully alive, but also to cultivate moral excellence in humans, character development,
yeah,
and not so much of an emphasis on being a worker. I don't care if it's a tech worker. I don't care if it's a work, someone's going to be making $300,000 a year. That's not workers
doesn't
worker, period.
matter.
Doesn't matter.
That's
But
right.
the idea is that, are we developing the whole person? I don't know, are we
That's
developing
right.
character? And I'm going to say this post-election thing in the United States here, where character was on the ballot, and I don't need to name names. I think character was on the ballot, and half the country said we like that kind of character, and I think that speaks to our delinquent
Yeah,
educational system, and things like the arts and humanities and civics and all those things that are getting pushed to the side for
that's right.
STEM, or even, I mean, I think our school is vocational education. They're like, no, we need more vocational education. I'm like, it already is a vocational education, and it's not. Or definitely not a classical liberal arts education. That's actually been shunned and pushed to the side. I'm like, well, actually, that's the most important thing, because you take a human being that you've helped develop themselves, and they'll find their purpose, their gifts and talents. And let's keep it real. You go on a
Yeah,
job, you learn on the job. It's
yeah,
still that way. You really, you get some stuff in school about the sciences or whatever, which is necessary, but the real thing happens on the job anyway. And um, I think that that's a missed opportunity that we're doing as a society.
yeah, and yeah, and we were chatting before we started this broadcast today. You know that the recovery for those of us that are concerned about this, like what will happen now when the ethics seems to have shifted to way far from what I want to see. I want to see
Mm-hmm.
for myself and for those younger than me, as life parades on. You know, are we going to have a life that has reflection in it, that has ownership and accountability in it, or is it just going to sort of devolve to this place of um, all out for ourselves? Let's foster our hatreds. Let's foster our stereotyping of others. That there's this battleground that has to exist between people that have different ideas in different skin colors and different gender preferences. You just go down the list, and it's a time for. I think it's a time for concern, and I'm not a parent, but I can imagine if you are a parent and you're seeing your kid and hoping that the world that they grow into will support this kid's journey and dreams, and provide happiness, an arena for happiness and all that. I think that we'll have an ecological system still. All those things, like where are the priorities now,
Yeah.
and how, for those of us that are affected by what happened a couple of weeks ago, are reevaluating how do we move forward without being so bludgeoned down by this fact that more than half of our country are fine with this disempowerment of our own better selves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that disempowerment of our own better selves. Wow, that's yeah. Wow, that's it. Well, we're coming near an end here. I think that's something that you're touching on, and a lot of what you've said, and community and being with others. Was that one of your six there? You've said so
Yeah.
much. Community. Can you say a little bit more about community? I mean, you already have. But is there anything else you want to add to that about the value of
Well,
that in a good life?
yeah. I mean, it's one thing. Again, community, you can't help when you're living. The amount of intentional communities now are few and far between. Most of
Yeah.
them collapse, particularly when the dynamic leader dies or goes away. The fact that Mt Madonna Center continues to thrive at some level is a testimony to the depth of what we've tried to create here. Because in community, we are continually rubbing against each other. You got, well, I don't care how intentioned we are. Tension, well intention has the word tension in it, and there's always going to be those or little grinds that happen. But some folks up here I've known for over 40 years, and that we walk this property together. Sometimes in the same direction, and other times maybe not so much. But just knowing that there's this dedication to that shared, that we're trying to do this in the best we can. This being the life dance, and that there's really nothing like having that feeling of support. That hey, there are others that are of like mind. We're not the same, and that's a beautiful thing about with the way our world is up here at Mount Madonna now, is that it's so eclectic. There are so many different ways that folks are finding their truth. And yet we know that to be up here, there has to be some cooperation together, some sense of I have to be aware of the other person that's walking in the building with me or near me. And that responsibility creates diplomacy along with our honesty, that it's both, that there's this feeling that there's a natural bond between us all just by being here. I don't care if you're here for a day, a week, 10 years, 40 years, close to 40, 50 years like me. It's that we are in this moment together in this beautiful place that supports our spiritual growth. And that's community. There for each other when things are hard, and there to celebrate with one another when things are just groovy.
Love it. That's life, right? I think that's like, being in a intentional community is practice. It's a practice, and it's such an important thing. All of what you just said, it's messy, it's challenging, but I love that inter. I don't know if that's even a word. I'm making some shit up right now, but
Go
inter
ahead, you make this shit up.
responsibility. I know, right?
Yeah,
There's an inter responsibility that we have responsibility for, not just for ourselves, but for each other. I love how you said that for anybody who walks in the room, even if you're only there for a day.
that's
How
right.
do I conduct myself? It goes back to character, doesn't it? How do I
Yeah.
conduct myself? What is my ethical moral, what is my moral compass here? What am I doing as a person?
And particularly up where I live, we're a retreat center, that rents out to groups, so how am I welcoming the folks
Mm,
that I don't know? How are the guests experiencing me? Because I could do lovely sadhana-esque things in the morning and do my breathing practices and my affirmations and all that stuff. But if I'm walking the world and I am being unwelcoming, if I'm being attitudinal, if all that stuff, then the there's a discrepancy there, and that my work I need to match. My walk needs to match the talk, and there's nothing like a community world that will let me see how much my walk sometimes doesn't match the talk, and then it's up to me to
hmm.
try to get better at doing that.
Oh yeah, right. Intentional community is challenging. That's why they don't last, because you got to be willing to do what you're saying.
That's right.
It can
That's
it can
right.
it can work. And it goes to one of the things that you mentioned: acceptance of ourselves, acceptance of others, in the sense that no, not just accepting anything, folks. Like you said earlier, not just
That's
not
right.
accepting craziness,
That's right.
but being, I think, embrace accepting. But as an example, accepting how I am showing up in this moment. It's not like, yay, this is great necessarily, but it's accept,
Mm,
okay, I'm being honest with myself. I'm
yeah.
being honest with myself right now. I'm being honest about my perception of the other person, or I'm being honest about how that person is. Like, we're being honest about, okay, the United States is an interesting place. We have to accept that this is the world as it is. This is how it is. Half the country said
Yeah.
we like this kind of character, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I think that acceptance is such a big piece, because once we just do that, then we can make the proper assessment about ourselves in the moment. We can actually check ourselves if we need to. We're like, you know what?
Yeah.
I was a jerk right there. I was not welcoming. I accept that I was being a jerk. How do now if I do that? if I have any kind of desire for any kind of moral, if I have a desire for moral excellence, I will try to transform myself. And also, if I can, if there was a person I can have that conversation with, yesterday I was being a jerk, and they're like, oh, maybe they say like, yeah, you were a jerk, or maybe they're
Yeah.
like, oh wow, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
It doesn't
What?
matter. It's like, no, I was a
Yeah.
jerk though. I wasn't the way my response wasn't. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that that requires acceptance. There's no way you're going to be able to do that unless you're honest with yourself.
That's right. That's right.
No. And so I know where the time is really near, but there was another thing I thought you said important. I think we've hit most of those six. Um, Nature.
Oh,
What else
uh,
can you say about nature? Because you said some sweet things about the dance of the
yeah.
ocean and being on and being at Mount Madonna. It's one of the most. It's so beautiful. But so
Yeah.
how does
It
nature?
is. It's my balm, BALM, not bomb, ball. But it really is the place that it's right there for me to find the soothing. Nature isn't always peaceful. There's a
No.
brutality in nature, and at the same time, I, the redwood trees, and you know, sometimes when I walk by, and um, we've heard of tree huggers before, and I have to admit I've done my share. Maybe not as beautifully as true tree huggers do, but when I walk by, just see these redwoods that were there before I came, and God willing will be there when I'm long gone. And then I just lean my literally, I just put my face right on them,
Mm-hmm.
and just remember that essence that's in this beautiful redwood tree, this wisdom of equanimity. And there's something beautifully stoic about a redwood tree. I don't know, whatever my imagery is for nature, but the redwoods, and how the birds and the squirrels that are dynamically involved up here, or even the little newts, after the rain is there making, and who knows how many of us have newts in our lives, but these little tiny reptilian creatures who were walking so slow across the path, and just that's what they got, and they're using what they got. It's just the smells and the sounds and the permanence of this innate beauty, this perfect design of what is, and how that the environment, in a way, if I let it, can quiet me, if I let it, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
fight it sometimes when out there walking,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's right there for us. What a gift! Just continually giving, if I'll listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah, that's a lot to say about that, but I think folks you can glean from what Sampad just said there, the value of being out and I guess on minimally quote unquote contaminated by humans nature.
That's right.
To be to be in that
And
space.
And I'll walk through and I'll go, my God, this is how beautiful the paths are, because there's folks who are out there digging and shaping and bulldozing the land to so that we can have these trails that go through the nature. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's something beautiful there. And you mentioned walking, because exercise is such an important piece of the puzzle. And yeah, we can have that conversation about the importance and value of exercise and to walk in nature, to move your
Mm,
body, keep the body moving. I always tell folks, I'm like, what a double whammy too. Being in nature, walking in nature, hiking, running, jogging, and whatever that may be, in a big bunch of redwoods. Oh, just extraordinary.
yeah.
And
So,
but yeah, but exercise is, all these things that you mentioned, the quote unquote science. They do research to I think some of it's common sense, but whatever, to prove that being in nature is good for your health, mental health, and physical health.
uh,
But exercise as well, I think even just simply walking up and down hills, you think about. I know people who don't have the worst diet, Like basically alcoholics got, just alcohol running through their stream, liver failing and everything. You're like, how in the world is this person still alive? But they
Hmm.
walk a lot.
That's right.
A lot. I know. I'm like, wow. I'm like, how are you alive? And I'm like, I'm not saying you should do what this person is doing, because being alive is not just it. But
That's right.
you
Yeah,
see, like, wow. And the biggest piece to that, because they have depression, everything, all the other stuff that you're like, wow, I'm surprised this person's still alive. But they walk and
that's right.
walk and walk. And I'm like, wow, stressing the body. And because the body is like a stress response mechanism. If you stress it intelligently by simply walking, apparently seems to work for some, and it will adapt to that stress.
That's
And
right.
in that adaptation process, the blood is flowing, you're building new tissues, cells are regenerating. It keeps some people alive. Now imagine you're doing all these other things that you mentioned. You're meditating, you're spending time in nature, you're cultivating your moral outlook on life, you're aspiring to be the best version of yourself. All those pieces together that you mentioned, what a beautiful life that is, that can potentially lead to.
And great respect for those of us who don't have the forest right out your door, like I'm so spoiled here, where, you do what you can do, but that feeling that with exercise and movement, it's a way to get out of my head. It's a way to sort of break up, the sort of the stress of engagement in some activity. This is sort of a freeing time. And I know so many people do this, and I see how essential it is.
Yeah,
Just move the body, feel the vitality of who we are outside of our work environment. I guess that's sort of the bottom line. And whether we're drinking a couple of bottles of whatever we're drinking, or whatever
right.
we're doing, I just hope that folks will have an outlet that can separate them from the whirlings in their head, and
Definitely.
that's healthy. That's
That's
something that's
healthy.
healthy. Yeah,
That's healthy.
because
I
there's other
Yeah.
outlets out there, but do something that's the healthy
That's
way to
healthy,
do it.
right?
Yeah,
Let's clarify.
yeah. I just want to clarify that. Yeah,
Yeah, no, make sure
yeah.
I said that about the alcohol. Trust me, the person who I'm referring to they're not doing well.
I think
And
Broderick told me
alcohol,
to.
and yeah, I know. Hell, I listened to this podcast on living well, and drinking was great as long as I exercise. I'm like, no, 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 no.
No, no, that's
That's
not
not
what
what
we
I
said.
said. No, not drinking. What a
Don't
horrible
do it.
drug, but whatever. All right. This has been awesome. I just love speaking with you. I think we've talked before, but I think I've really got to know you in a much deeper and richer way through this conversation. This has been great. Or do you have any final words? Anything you want to add to anything you want to say there to the audience? Can you share
I
any?
would thank you, Broderick, for doing this. For keeping. I was going to say the good fight, but that sounds so battle like. But that you continue to do what you do, which is you live in kindness and try to make the world a better place. So I know that sounds so cliche-ish, but I do believe that with you, and
Mhm.
getting to know you and seeing how you operate and how you move through life. I just say amen and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to spend a little time with you.
Yeah, thank you too as well. And yeah, you keep doing that work too. I encourage just being a light. You're such a light when you make me smile. You make me happy when I'm around you. And just getting the wisdom out of you today. It's been lovely, and get to share with the world that yes, I am. I'm trying my best through these conversations to encourage more of these types of conversations, and also just to have conversations with people such as yourself. And I think there's so much wisdom in people who lived a long life, experimenting in life and sharing the wisdom that has been gleaned from a life of experimentation. And thank you for this. This has been very lovely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.